finish. Just before I move to question time, this morning in my statement I implied that the codes had not been presented to the parliament, but I advised the Senate that they were indeed yesterday lodged in the Senate and the House. So thank you. Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, President. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. I refer the Minister to the words of the late Harry Evans, the longest-serving clerk of the Senate, who said, and I quote, "The value of estimates hearings in improving accountability and probity of government has long been widely recognised. The hearings allow apparent problems in government operations to be explored and exposed and give rise to a large amount of information which would not otherwise be disclosed. They have come to be recognised as a major parliamentary institution of accountability." Minister, won't the government's plans to axe a full week from the traditional 4 weeks of Senate estimates lead to less accountability, lower standards of probity, reduced disclosure of information and mean that any problems in government operations are not properly explored and exposed by the Senate?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Order. 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 I'm waiting to call the Minister. Order. Senator Wong. Senator Watt. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thank you very much for that question, especially on a day where the House has just censured the former Prime Minister for dual. No, I'm happy to take the questions. You know, you did 9 years. You had 9 years, and
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator Cash, Senator Henderson, Senator Dean Smith. Minister Wong, please continue.
I'll take the interjection because you're right. You know, the parliament under you was a parliament which was not respected. The parliament under you was a parliament because the Westminster system does actually require ministers to be accountable through the parliament to the Australian people. Who was the accountable minister in that place? Mr Morrison and another. So don't come in here telling Australians you care about accountability when they saw 9 years of cover-up, saw 9 years of sports rorts, saw 9 years where you refused the basic standards of probity.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat.
Sorry.
Order on my left. Your leader has asked a question. I cannot hear the response. Minister Wong, please continue.
Thank you. And I remind those opposite of some of their standards of accountability. Changing the law to hide significant energy price increases from the Australian people until after the election. Refusing to release the State of the Environment report because it contained too much damning proof the environment was in a poor and deteriorating state. And of course, something that was refused to be answered in estimates, all of the sports rorts questions, which in estimates you never answered.
Senator Wong.
You never answered.
Senator Wong.
Now, what I would say to those
Senator Wong.
as those opposite would know,
Senator
I was
Wong,
a great...
please resume your seat. Order on my left. Order. Senator Mackenzie, Senator Mackenzie, I've called the chamber to order. I expect to be able to hear the minister in relative quiet and to stop yelling louder than the minister is speaking. Minister, please continue.
I knew Harry Evans and I had a lot of respect for him and what I would remind those is additional estimate statements are associated with MyEFO. We have had a budget and we are having estimates associated with the budget.
Your time has expired. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, Prime Minister Albanese has said again and again and again that the Australian people deserve transparency and accountability. Won't the axing of a full week of Senate estimates lead to less transparency and less accountability? How can the axing of this week be anything other than the Labor government taking an axe to government accountability and transparency?
Order. Order. Minister Wong.
I would invite those opposite, if they want to talk about accountability, perhaps consider some of what is being disclosed through the Royal Commission into Robodebt, and the extent. Well, you know what? You know, it is really interesting.
Order.
You know, Senator Birmingham, aren't you a Johnny-come-lately? Aren't you a Johnny-come-lately to this issue of integrity? You were a senior minister in that government. Did you have the spine to stand up and tell Scott Morrison he was wrong? Did you have the spine to tell up and tell Mr Taylor he was wrong? You know, you're always talking, aren't you? Where's the spine? Show a bit of leadership. Everyone will know.
Senator Wong. Senator Wong, resume your seat. There's a senator. Order. 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 I have a senator on his feet, and Senator McGrath. Senator Scarr.
President, I think the Leader of the Government in this place should...
Senator Scarr, what is your point?
Directing comments through you, President, as opposed to gesticulating rudely at the member of the opposition and not referring to him directly.
Thank you, Senator Scarr. Minister Wong, please continue.
I remember how long they fought against an anti-corruption commission. I remember how long they fought against that. And now this man, who's a member of the leadership group, has the temerity to come in here and tell us about transparency. He's discovered it. Now he's on that side. Everybody knows. No leadership, no backbone, and Johnny come lately on transparency.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Your time has expired. Senator Birmingham, second supplementary. Order. Senator Birmingham, please resume your seat. Order. This is a most disorderly start to question time, and I'm going to ask those on my left and my right to listen with respect. Senator Birmingham.
President, together with Senators Babet, Hanson, Lambie, Pocock, Roberts and Tyrrell, I have just written to Senator Wong and Minister indicating that we do not accept the arguments put forward by the government to defend its cutting of Senate estimates, and that we will not be in a position to support the proposed sitting schedule for 2023. If, as you say, you're all for transparency, accountability and respect of the parliament, will you listen to the crossbench senators and the opposition and revisit your decision to axe this estimates week?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Senator Wong, please wait for the call. Senator Wong.
Thank you, President. It's interesting how quickly conventions which we observed for 9 years are junked by those opposite. No, let me just finish this. For 9 years, the Greens moved amendments to your sitting pattern, which we never supported. Oh, it didn't take you very long, did it? Didn't take you very long. There are a few other conventions in this place if you want to go down this path. There are a few other conventions that we can go down this path. Additional estimates are for the purpose of examining the estimates from MyEFO. That is actually what they are for. And we have. Do you want?
Order. Senator Cash, I'm calling your side in. Senator Watt. I'm waiting for quiet until I call the minister back again. Minister.
As I said, the additional estimates have been for the purpose of examining a mid-year economic and fiscal outlook update. A technicality, it's because constitutionally the budget appropriate. Would you like to answer the question? Maybe, Senator, you didn't answer the questions in government. Would you like to answer them now?
Thank you, Minister Wong. Your time has expired. Before I call you, Senator Dodson, it would seem to be an appropriate time to draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the gallery of Sex Discrimination Commissioner Kate Jenkins, Chair of the Parliamentary Leadership Task Force Kerry Hartland and the Secretariat. On behalf of all senators, I welcome you to the Senate. Senator Dodson. Senator McGrath, I have a senator waiting to ask a question. Senator Dodson.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Can the Minister update the Senate on the findings of the Closing the Gap report?
Minister.
I thank Senator Dodson for his question. I thank him for his leadership in this parliament and his leadership for Australians, First Nations peoples and non-Indigenous Australians for decades. Today, the Prime Minister tabled the Commonwealth Closing the Gap Annual Report 2022 and regrettably, deeply regrettably, the progress is mixed, with only 4 out of the 9 targets for which we have updated data being on track. There is some good news, some areas where we are on track. More than 89% of babies are being born with a healthy birth weight. That is on track. 96.7% of children were enrolled in preschool in 2021, also on track. But there has been unacceptably slow progress in other areas, and some metrics have gone backwards. This includes children being school-ready, rates of incarceration, the number of children in out-of-home care and deaths by suicide. For the majority of socio-economic targets, there is little new data available to reliably track trends. Work has started to improve this data, so we will have a clearer picture of how we are tracking in future years. But I think we are all obliged, on all sides of this chamber, to recognise that decades of inadequate government policies have failed First Nations people and have failed to close the gap. We must reverse the entrenched inequality, disadvantage and structural racism faced by First Nations peoples. And we on this side of the chamber, and I hope all across the chamber, are committed to doing this, to ensuring sustained progress over the life of the 2020 National Agreement and the Commonwealth Closing the Gap implementation plan. It is clear that the Closing the Gap architecture can only work if we work together, when there is coordinated efforts from all jurisdictions, and most importantly, in genuine partnership with First Nations peoples. It is only when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples...
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Dodson, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the Minister outline how the government is working to accelerate progress towards closing the gap?
Thank you, Senator Dodson. Minister.
Thank you, Senator Dodson, and thank you again for your contribution to the government's commitments in this area. They include, in the October budget, $54 million for 500 First Nations health workers and practitioners, $164 million for vital health infrastructure, $33 million to make early education more accessible, and $100 million to improve remote housing, particularly in the Northern Territory homelands. And importantly, and I know Senator Dodson has spoken about this, $81 million in around up to 30 community-led justice reinvestment initiatives to seek to divert young people from the criminal justice system and to reduce crime. President, we must do more. We must do more, and I think what is the compelling message from this report is why it is so important for First Nations people to be heard and to be part of designing and delivering the solutions to this disadvantage.
Senator Dodson, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the Minister outline how the Voice to Parliament supports the objective to close the gap?
Thank you, Senator Dodson. Minister.
So-called solutions conceived in Canberra and imposed on communities without consultation are more likely than not to end in expensive, ineffective and even counterproductive failure. This is what the Prime Minister said today. But when a government listens to people with experience, with earned knowledge of kinship and country and culture and community, when we trust in the value of self-determination and empowerment, then the results are always better. And that, at its core, the Closing the Gap report asks us if we're going to continue to do the same thing whilst expecting a different outcome. The Uluru State from the Heart had a humble request at its core. We seek to be heard. It is the same message that we see in this report today. Why it is so important for that hand outstretched, which is the Uluru Statement from the Heart, to be met generously by all Australians.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Little.
President, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Farrell. I refer to media reports today that over 1,000 contractors have been axed with little notice, just 26 days before Christmas, with employees quoted as saying, "It's not great to get this kind of news right before Christmas." Is this what the government means when they say they want secure jobs for all Australians?
Good question.
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Little for her her question at this time. A number of commercial ICT contracts at Australia, Services Australia, have recently ended their terms. And the impacted contractors will end in line with the relevant terms and notice period. So in other words, these contracts were coming to an end in accordance with the terms of the contracts, and the government, and in particular Services Australia, have applied the terms and conditions that relate to those contracts. These ICT providers have supported Services Australia to significantly bolster the ICT systems to meet unprecedented demand on our systems and services during emergencies such as the pandemic, and we do thank them for their support. Well, I'll take that intervention. These were contracts. These were contracts that were freely entered into by the former government. They were freely entered into by the former government. There was a set of terms and conditions, and the government is simply complying with those terms and conditions. Now, I've had some experience of what you did with ICT contracts, and I'd like to refer to the PEMS contract,
Thank you, Senator Farrell. Your time has expired. Senator Little, first supplementary.
Thank you. So clearly you didn't mean them. Given the significant number of job losses, can the government guarantee there will be no reduction in access to services or an increase in any backlog of claims by this decision?
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister.
I didn't finish my... Thank you, President, and thank Senator Little for her question. I've actually seen what you've done with ICT contracts, and the perfect example is the PEMS contract, a contract that was supposed to deliver services for members of Parliament. Originally cost $48 million. Now up to $66 million and counting, and it's now been referred to the...
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Little.
Point of order, President. The question was about reduction in services and backlog.
Thank you, Senator Little. I'll draw the minister back to the question. Thank you, Minister Farrell.
Look, I'm not... Thank you, President, and thanks for that clarification from Senator Little. Essentially, Services Australia consists of a workforce that's made up of the Australian Public Service staff. These staff are, from time to time, supplemented by contractors, and that's the people that we're talking about at the moment. These numbers go up and down depending on government priorities and changing circumstances. And between...
your time has expired, Senator Farrell. Senator Little, second supplementary.
Thank you. Senator Farrell, can you confirm that none of these contractors were working on cyber security programs and projects which would deal with vulnerable Australians' data, and that this decision will not see any reduction in the protection of their data?
Thank you, Senator Little. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Thank you, Senator Little. Obviously, this is not my own personal portfolio. I would not expect that there would be any reduction in services through this process, and particularly as it relates to the issues that you've just mentioned in your question. But I will have a chat with the minister, and I'll come back to you if there is any issue different to what I've just said.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator Cox.
Is to Senator Watt, the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. In this government's first budget, $1.9 billion in equity investment was allocated for the development of the Middle Arm Sustainable Development Precinct in Darwin Harbour. Part of this funding is for a common-use marine infrastructure. Can the government rule out this port will have a fossil fuel component, such as a gas-fed petrochemical hub?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Watts.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Cox, for your question. As you're aware, and as you've said, the government will provide $1.9 billion in planned equity to support the development of the Middle Arm Precinct in Darwin, together with regional logistic hubs along key transport links. It is intended to be a multi-purpose precinct, so I'm not at a position at this point in time to rule in particular developments or rule out particular developments. But this investment will enable the precinct to be globally competitive and sustainable, with a focus on low emission production, green hydrogen and critical minerals processing. Demand, as you're probably aware, Senator Cox, is growing for clean energy sources, particularly in the Northern Territory, and Labor's investment will help position the Northern Territory and Northern Australia to diversify their economy and create new jobs. This investment is not a subsidy for fossil fuels in the way that some people have characterised it. Rather, funding will go towards infrastructure that will support users to export clean energy, critical to meet our commitment to net zero, like green hydrogen and lithium batteries that are critical to decarbonisation. Now, particularly in my previous role as Shadow Minister for Northern Australia, I spent a lot of time in the Northern Territory with my good friend Senator McCarthy, along with the House of Representatives members from the Northern Territory, Luke Gosling and Warren Snowden, the former member, and now Marianne Scrimgeour. And I know they are passionate advocates for the Northern Territory to diversify the economy up there and to take advantage of some of the incredible natural and mineral resources that the Northern Territory has. There are extremely exciting projects in the offing in the Northern Territory in that clean energy space, and I think they offer an opportunity to produce lots of very important jobs for that part of the country.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Cox, first supplementary.
The Northern Territory Government's investment website recently changed its description of the Middle Arm project by deleting references to petrochemicals. Did the federal government ask for this public information to be in fact edited?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister.
Well, I don't know what evidence Senator Cox has for suggesting that the federal government may have been involved in this, and I really think that questions as to what the Northern Territory government puts in documents are questions that should be directed to the Northern Territory government.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Cox.
On a point of order of relevance, it was about whether the government, the federal government, gave permission for this to be edited.
Thank you, Senator Cox. The minister is being directly relevant. Minister Watt, please continue.
Well, excuse me. As I say, President, questions as to what the content of Northern Territory government documents do or do not contain should be directed to the Northern Territory government. And I mean, it's all very well for the Greens to roll in, as they like to do, and say, did you do this, did you do that, promoting some kind of conspiracy theory without any evidence for it whatsoever. Perhaps Senator Cox would like to present any evidence that she has to suggest that the federal government was involved in that. So, as I say, this is a really important development for the Northern Territory that the federal government is very pleased to back, and it provides an opportunity for some very important job development in the Northern Territory going forward.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Cox, second supplementary.
When I attended COP27 this year in Sharm el-Sheikh, I heard about the government's commitment to the protection of mangroves. Darwin Harbour has significant mangroves, How many hectares of mangroves will be destroyed by blasting and the creation of Middle Arms federally funded marine infrastructure?
Thank you, Senator Cox. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. And I'm very well aware that the Albanese government does take issues of environmental protection, including mangrove protection, extremely seriously. I know that Minister Plibersek is doing a lot on this front, particularly as the Environment Minister for their country.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Cox.
Again, point of relevance. On relevance. How many hectares of mangroves are going to be destroyed by this marine infrastructure being developed?
Thank you, Senator Cox. And you also referenced COP, and I do believe that the minister is being relevant. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. And again, thank you, Senator Cox. Of course, this development, like every development that is proposed for Australia of the scale of this development, will have to go through an EIS process. That EIS process would consider the very matters that Senator Cox is questioning, and that is the appropriate process in which to make those sorts of decisions based on expert evidence about what all of the environmental impacts of this development would be, whether they be about mangroves or any other feature of the development. So, as I say, and as I've continued to say, this is an important development for the Northern Territory, and it's an important development for the entire country. We support it, we support the jobs that come with it, and we support the clean energy that will come with it as well.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Your time has expired. Senator Walsh.
My question is to the Minister for Women, Senator Gallagher. And in asking it, I acknowledge the early educators, disability workers and hospo workers from the United Workers Union in the gallery today. Welcome. Can the Minister give an update on how the government is working across the parliament to progress recommendations from the Set the Standard report?
Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the question and welcome those representatives from unions joining us today, and also acknowledge Kate Jenkins and Kerry Hartland and the team from supporting the Parliamentary Leadership Task Force, and of course Kate Jenkins is the author of the Set the Standard report, and so fabulous to have you here as well. Today we acknowledge the one-year anniversary of the Set the Standard report and its findings that Parliament House was lagging behind the rest of the country when it came to a safe workplace for staff and in particular women. It was all there: gender inequality with a lack of women in senior roles, a lack of accountability in systems, a work hard, play hard culture that left some, particularly young staff and young women, vulnerable to exploitation and sexual misconduct, and high levels of power and discretion in relation to employment, combined with insecure employment. I would like to thank all of those current and former Parliament House staff who came forward to talk about their experiences working in Parliament. Many of those experiences are harrowing, and speaking out must have required enormous strength and bravery. A centrepiece reform from the report is the establishment of a new HR entity body for parliamentarians and their staff to provide independent advice and support and drive an agenda of professional development and best practice, training and continuous improvement for staff. The recommendation flowed from the Set the Standard report, and staff across the parliament have been consulted on how this new HR body should operate in practice. And I would like to acknowledge the work that's gone in by Meg Brighton and her team in the Parliamentary Workplace Support Service, which has made such a difference in such a short amount of time. We know that staff trust it, they like using it, and it's been a really welcome addition to the infrastructure here. Cultural change in Parliament will only happen when we all work together, and I'd like to acknowledge Senator Farrell, Hume, Davies and Waters for their work on us and joining us on the Parliamentary Leadership Task Force.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the Minister update the Senate on how Parliament House can work towards becoming a model workplace?
Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the question. Ensuring our Parliament reflects the community we serve is critical to becoming a model workplace. The Parliament is a different place from a year ago, with the highest number on record of women across both houses, 38.4% in the House of Representatives and 56.6% in the Senate. There are now 10 women in Cabinet, the highest number ever to hold positions in an Australian Cabinet. At the heart of the continuing work to become a model workplace is the experience of staff. So thank you to all who continue to advocate for change and to your respective unions. Labor strongly supports the creation of a staff advisory body to support the multi-party parliamentary leadership task force and are committed to ensuring that staff voices are heard. Yesterday, the Joint Select Committee on Parliamentary Standards tabled their report on codes of conduct. This represents a historic milestone for the parliament, and I acknowledge the Deputy Speaker in the other place for her leadership as chair of the Joint Select Committee.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the Minister please update the Senate on why these reforms are so critical to improving conditions that will benefit workers in Parliament?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister.
Thank you. Well, we strongly believe that Parliament and the workplace in Parliament should lead the country in terms of culture and standards. And we also want to attract the best and the brightest to work in Parliament House. We want to retain them and we want to ensure that they have a positive work experience in this building. Too many bright and hard-working people left with their careers cut short, their mental health affected after experiencing bullying and sexual harassment after working in Parliament House. We will only achieve the best outcomes for the Australian people if we have a safe and a supportive workplace for those that serve the public. The Parliament has already passed laws to clarify workplace protections and make clear that Age Discrimination and Disability Discrimination Act applies to MOP staff. The implementation of the MOPS Act review will drive systemic change for staff and deliver a professional and modern employment framework, and every one of us has a responsibility to ensure that we achieve what we're setting out to do.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hanson.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. Contrary to the claims of Labor Senator Pratt this afternoon, clinical evidence shows that puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones used to treat adolescents diagnosed with gender dysphoria cause negative long-term health outcomes such as reduced bone density and impaired fertility. Does the Albanese government support these treatments being administered to young Australians?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Hanson for the question. I didn't hear what Senator Pratt, what her contribution was earlier, but I know that she understands this issue and she has a level of knowledge that probably exceeds most people in this place on the subject. And so even without knowing her comments, I have no problem aligning myself with them. I would also say that on this issue with which I have talked to Senator Pratt and she has educated me, I take that unusual step. On the broader question which you raised on gender dysphoria and the Albanese government's position on it, our position is that every child and every young person should have access to all of the necessary supports that they need to ensure they access appropriate health care regardless of the reason for which they might be seeking that care. That is our position. That is a responsible, mature position. This is a matter between young people, their families and the treating health professionals, whatever they might be, doctors, psychologists, other health professionals. That is the position that we would take. We also think that every time issues around this get raised, people listen and they hear and it affects them. And so we also think that there should be a level of responsibility in this chamber to deal with these matters sensitively and carefully because young people's well-being depends on it.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hanson, first supplementary.
Minister, in reference to your comment saying that children and parents are listened to, I'm sorry, talk to the mothers of these parents who have had these puberty blockers. They have no say whatsoever. They're listening to children under 18 years of age.
Senator
they have no say in their children.
Do you have a question?
The Daily Telegraph newspaper last weekend reported tenfold increase in Australian adolescents presenting the public gender clinics for treatment for gender dysphoria over the past 8 years. Will the Minister please explain to the Senate what the Albanese government will do to understand this alarming increase?
Minister.
Thank you. Well, I'm not familiar with the article that Senator Hanson refers, but I would go back to my original answer, which is that if young people and their families are seeking support and assistance for health care and health advice through whatever means, if there is an increase in that, that is not necessarily, in fact, that's not a bad thing. I mean, we want people to be accessing the services and care, health care, legal advice, mental health support, whatever they need, in order to get the services they want and need and should receive. These are really, really difficult and complex situations that young people are navigating, and they need access to the full range of support. If they are accessing those services, then good on them. And I hope their families are getting the right support as well, and that they are able to receive the care that they need from a country that provides
Thank you, Minister.
that kind
Your
of service
time has
for them.
expired. Senator Hanson, second supplementary.
Thank you. As responsible leaders, we all want the best evidence-based outcomes for young Australians. Will the minister support the referral of these matters for inquiry so the Senate may investigate the causes of this increase in gender dysphoria and explore the long-term health impacts of puberty blocker and cross-sex hormone treatments on Australians' young people? Regardless of the fact of what Senator Pratt has said, it is about having an inquiry so all Australians can hear what's being said by parents, by children, by the medical profession as well.
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Your time has expired, Minister.
I understand that's a motion that will be moved later today, and our voting intention will be made clear when that question is put. I haven't specifically looked at the referral closely. It doesn't fall under my area of responsibility at this stage, but we will have a voting position that is clear on that. But again, I would say these are not necessarily matters that the Senate is best placed to determine on access to healthcare services. We would ensure, I think the responsibility of the federal government is to make sure that the service system is there and that young people and their families are able to use them if they need to in a whole range of healthcare circumstances.
Senator Cadell.
Thank you, President. My question is to Minister Wong, the Minister representing the Prime Minister. Minister, I refer to the secret Labor government report based on October data titled Estimated Impacts of CFPS, coal-fired power stations, and associated mine closures in the Australian today. Is it correct that this report models regional job losses in the Hunter, projected unemployment, loss of income to local communities, loss of taxation revenue, and loss of household consumption expenditure in local communities? And when will the Minister and the government release the report in full?
Thank you, Senator Cadell. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thank you to the Senator for the question. I regret to admit that I may not have read every report in The Australian recently. I find it often better to be selective about what I read. But I would make this point. What we saw under the last 9 years in the electricity sector is that we saw, I think it was 4 gigawatts of dispatchable power exit the system, only 1 gigawatt to come in. We saw decisions made by the market.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Cadell.
Of order on relevance. This is about a specific government report.
Thank you, Senator Cadell. Your question was extremely wide-ranging, and it also referred to a report in the Australian... Order! Order! It's not a debating point. You also referred to a report in the Australian and asked the Minister to comment that. Minister, please resume.
I was simply making the point that there have been already closures and the market refusing to invest in coal-fired power because of the lack of policy certainty. And I appreciate the tone with which the Senator asked the question, so I'll try not to divert into the response which talks about the last 9 years. But I would make the point that we do believe providing the market with certainty around transition is important. That is the lowest cost way for this transition to occur. Unlike, those on this side actually think you try to get the market to work rather than having taxpayers' fund prop up coal-fired power, which was the position that some on the other side argued. I'm not familiar. I've been upfront with you, Senator. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the actual article in question and whether it refers to a... Well, yes. Okay, I don't read every article in the Australian, Senator Mackenzie. I apologise. No, it's just not the sort of first priority in terms of reading. But anyway, that's okay. But I will endeavour to see
Thank you, Minister.
if the report.
Your time has expired. Senator Cadell, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. I again refer to this secret report, again named Estimated Impacts of CFPS, coal-fired power stations and associated coal mine closures. From your there, it has been reported in that report that this secret report shows a spike in hunter employment and local jobs of about 800 jobs. Is this distressing news for the Hunter region correct, or is it erroneous?
Minister Wong.
I'm not accepting the assertion around secret report in an article that I have been upfront with you, Senator Cadell, I have not read. But I can say to you that the worst thing for communities is a lack of...
Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Cadell.
I seek leave to table the...
Senator is seeking leave to table a newspaper article. Is leave... No.
Report.
I think the answer is no, Senator Cadell.
I want to keep it secret.
Minister Wong.
Well, there is a... if you
Order. Order. Order.
Can I keep talking, or would you like to make
Minister, please continue.
We're always so pleased when you and Senator Rennick make a contribution, Senator Van. What I was going to say to you, Senator Cadell, 2 points. One is that there is a usual process for consideration of tabling, which we will observe as a courtesy and a convention. Secondly, I would make the point that what is bad for communities is lack of policy certainty and unplanned exits from of generation from the system, which is what occurred under the chaos of the previous government. We have no intention of that repeating. We are going to ensure we deal with this transition, which we have been upfront about, in a way that recognises the need to ensure security of supply and...
Senator Cadell, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Again, I refer to the same document, the estimated impacts of CFPS and associated mine closures. Minister, can you confirm that it's correct that the report is modelled on the assumption there will be a loss of 30% of income for coal-fired power station workers and mine workers in the Hunter? And is the Hunter region the sole focus of this report, or is it wider? And is the government got job losses across Australia?
Thank you, Senator Cadell. Minister.
No, I'm not going to confirm that for the reasons I've articulated previously. And what I would say to those opposite is this: the majority of the global economy has committed to net zero by 2050. If we are not in a position to compete in that global economy, that is what will affect Australia's GDP growth, Australian jobs, and the prosperity of future generations. And I know you all want to think that you can live in the past. We can live in the past and we can go back to the 1950s. But if you're committed to net zero, you're committed to a transition in the Australian economy. The difference between you and us is we will have a plan. We will have a plan. We will implement a plan. We will ensure that we increase Australia's costs.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Order. 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 I had to call the minister then about 5 times because there's so much noise in here, my voice can't be heard. I ask you to... Senator Canavan. I am asking you to listen in silence to the remaining time the minister has. Minister.
If those opposite are also committed to net zero, I hope they have a plan too, because we have one and we will implement it and we will give people certainty.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKim.
Thanks, President. My minister is... That could actually be a Freudian slip. That could be a Freudian slip.
Senator Scarr. Order.
President, I might start again. My question is to Minister Watt, representing the Minister for Home Affairs, and despite the jovial start, it is a serious question, Minister. According to the Department of Home Affairs, there are 92 people who arrived by boat to seek asylum in Australia still stranded on Nauru. It seems from answers in Senate estimates this week that the government has no idea how many have been left to languish in Papua New Guinea and, in fact, couldn't care less. But I can inform the government that that number is 94. Minister, it's been almost 10 years since a Labor government first exiled those people offshore. Why will your Labor government not offer those 186 people temporary resettlement in Australia so they can be cared for and supported here while arrangements are being made for their permanent resettlement in a third country?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator McKim. This is a very serious question, and I don't think that any Australian is happy about the fact that people have been in detention offshore for as long as they have. But our government was very clear going to the election that our policy in relation to people on Nauru was that we would support third country resettlement, and that is something that we said a very long time before the election. And the fundamental problem here is that it took so long for the former government to do anything about the resettlement of these people. I mean, we all remember the years that an offer was on the table from the New Zealand government to resettle people from Nauru, and it didn't happen. If the former government had taken up that option of resettling people in New Zealand, we should have been in a position where no one was still in Nauru. But of course, that was not taken by the former government, and that offer from New Zealand remained unanswered. We are certainly continuing to work with a number of third countries to consider facilitating resettlement, and that remains our policy. In the meantime, as Senator McKim may be aware, we have also made a commitment to make permanent the very large number of people who are in Australia on temporary protection visas, who have been on those for far too long and have been left to languish in that situation while on Australian soil. So we are doing a lot of work across a range of visa categories. I was talking yesterday about the work that we're undertaking to clear the visa backlog as well, but our position remains that people on Nauru should be resettled in third countries, and we continue to work very hard with those countries and the people themselves to enable that to happen.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator McKim, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. There are over 5,000 people who arrived in Australia by boat to seek asylum since 2013, and over 2,000 of that 5,000 were never actually transferred to either Manus Island or Nauru. People from the same country arrived on the same boat at the same time, and they were separated to totally different futures by completely arbitrary decisions. Why are some of them now worthy of permanent protection in Australia, while others remain abandoned in offshore detention?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator McKim.
Senator McKim.
And I welcome Senator McKim recognising that our government has committed to make permanent the very large number of people who the former government left languishing on temporary protection visas. That is a position that we always opposed. We thought it was extremely unfair for people who had been granted those temporary protection visas to remain lacking certainty from year to year. And of course, there's a massive cost to taxpayers in requiring the regular processing and reprocessing of people on those temporary protection visas. So we are undertaking a lot of work to make that happen. It's not an easy process because of the sheer number of people who are on those temporary protection visas, but it's something that we remain committed to. The people, of course, who are on temporary protection visas have been found to be refugees and are owed our protection, and that's why our government is committed to ensuring that they get a permanent protection, which is what they should have been granted in the first place.
Senator McKim, second supplement.
It's like an episode of Utopia in this place at times. Minister, nearly a year ago, the Morrison government callously washed its hands of responsibility for the people in that cohort still in exile in Papua New Guinea and abandoned them in a place which is not safe and does not support them. Some of them are dying there now. Will your government reverse that cynical decision and accept responsibility for the people that the Labor Party sent there 10 years ago?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Watt.
Well, it's good that Senator McKim's been able to get his video for his social media, which is what we know that was all about and what it's always about from Senator McKim. Because if Senator McKim was actually genuinely concerned about these issues, he'd be working with our government to assist us to implement the policy that we took to the election. But we know it's never about the facts, it's never about the substance with the Greens. It continues to be...
Minister Watt.
Here's some more video for Senator McKim.
Minister Watt. Senator McKim, you have asked your question. I would ask that you listen in silence. Minister, please continue. Senator Whish-Wilson, I don't need commentary from you either. I've asked for silence. I've asked for silence. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. And as I say, it's disappointing that for the Greens these issues are always more about the social media clip or about the stunt rather than about the substance. Exhibit A, B, C, D, E and F.
Please resume Senator McKim, please resume your seat. I have a senator already on his feet. Senator Scarr.
President, I refer to Standing Order 193 in relation to imputation of improper motives. Senator McKim cares deeply about this issue. He has a right to ask questions without having improper motives imputed to him.
Senator Scarr, Senator McKim, please resume your seat. On the same point of order? Yep.
That was exactly the point of order I was about to make. You're entitled to ask your questions in this place without having your motives impugned in such a way. That is, quite frankly, a disgraceful accusation from Senator Watt, and he should withdraw it.
I'm going to ask both senators. Your question, Senator Wong, I'm responding. Senator McKim, your question, in my view, was asked in an extremely aggressive way. I do appreciate you have a lot of passion about the question, as do a range of senators in here on the questions that they asked, but in my view it was asked in a very aggressive way. I would remind Senator Watt of the point of order, and I would ask him to answer your question in a respectful way, but I'm asking all senators to listen respectfully as well. Minister Watt. Senator Ruston.
Point of order. The fact that the question was asked as to whether the motives of the asker of the question were impugned by the comments by the minister, are you actually not requesting for him to withdraw that imputation?
Senator Ruston, what I heard was that Senator Wong. What I heard, and I am more than happy to look at this on the record, Senator Wong, please resume your seat, was a comment about the party, not the individual. If I'm wrong on that, I will come back and correct. I have ruled on that. I don't, Senator Hanson-Young, I will come to you. I will come to you. I've got Senator Scarr on his feet. So just so that I'm clear, what I heard was a reference to the Greens. Senator Wong.
I understand that Senator McKim has asked the minister to withdraw, and I'd ask you to call the minister.
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. I withdraw any imputation against Senator McKim that I may have made, but the point I'm trying to make is these are very serious issues, and Senator McKim knows that not only I but every member of the government takes these issues very seriously, and that's why we have been putting so much effort into both third-party resettlement since taking office and also the processing of people, thousands of people who were left languishing on temporary protection visas when we took office. We will continue to do that, and we don't need the sort of performances that often are undertaken in this chamber by the Greens.
Your time has expired. Senator Bilyk.
Earlier this week, I met with participants in the Pacific Australia Emerging Leaders Summit. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Can you tell us how the Albanese Labor government building stronger partnerships with the countries of the Pacific family and the Pacific region as a whole is going?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister. Minister Wong, it's your question.
I apologise. I was distracted by a discussion with the leader. I regret. I will. Would you mind repeating the question, and I'll make sure there's additional time post 3 o'clock.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bilyk, please repeat the question.
My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong.
Order. Order.
Earlier this week, I met with participants in the Pacific Australia Emerging Leaders Summit. So can you tell us how is the Albanese Labor government building stronger partnerships with the countries of the Pacific family and the Pacific region as a whole?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister Wong.
Bilyk, and I apologise that Senator Birmingham and I was so engrossed that I didn't hear a question that I had, in fact, spoken with you about the importance of asking, and I acknowledge, and I will come to them, those members of the Pacific family who are here today in the gallery. We are seeking to build a stronger Pacific family by showing up and listening, by acting on climate change and by boosting our security cooperation and development assistance. The government's investment in maritime security, climate action, labour mobility, health and education will help our regional partners become more economically resilient, develop critical infrastructure and provide their own security. The investments the Albanese government has put in place will deliver on our commitments to build a stronger and more united Pacific family and a peaceful, prosperous and resilient region. As Foreign Minister since the election, I've had the privilege of undertaking 7 separate visits to the Pacific, visiting 11 countries and, importantly, attending the Pacific Islands Forum in Fiji with the Prime Minister and Minister Conroy, the Minister for International Development in the Pacific. In addition, the Deputy Prime Minister has visited PNG, Nauru, Tonga and Fiji, where he signed a landmark Status of Forces agreement. Minister Conroy has visited Fiji, PNG, Solomon Islands and last week attended the first in-person Pacific Community Ministerial Conference, SPC, since the onset of the pandemic in Vanuatu. Australia is a proud founding member of the SPC, which is the largest scientific and technical regional organisation in the Pacific. For 75 years, SPC has brought the Pacific together in the Pacific way for members to achieve our shared ambitions and face our shared challenges. And I know Minister Conroy was so pleased to represent Australia in this important forum.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bilyk, first supplementary.
Thank you. How is the Albanese Labor government responding to the needs and the priorities of the Pacific family?
Minister.
Thank you to Senator Bilyk. And one of the things that we have been very focused on communicating is that our partnerships in the region will be guided by Pacific priorities. Communities and leaders across the Blue Pacific has been clear about the impact of the 3 Cs. This was part of the discussion at the Leaders Forum at Pacific Island Forum, Leaders discussion. The 3 Cs, climate, COVID and contest. This is articulated in the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, endorsed by Forum leaders this year, and I was very pleased to be with Prime Minister Bainimarama and other Pacific leaders at the UN when this was launched. It is a vision for the Pacific's economic, environmental and strategic future written by and written for Pacific nations and Pacific peoples. At the heart is a simple concept that the Pacific knows best what its priorities are and how to achieve them.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bilyk, second supplementary.
Thank you for that answer. Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government elevating Pacific voices on the world stage and supporting Pacific emerging leaders?
Minister Wong.
Thank you. When it comes to climate action, the nations of the Pacific have led the way for a long time, and I remember as Climate Minister being struck by the power and sincerity of the voice of Pacific Island nations on climate change, well ahead of where the domestic debate was in Australia. They have called on us to act, and we have heard them and we have responded, and we are honoured that all Pacific Island Forum governments have support Australia's bid to co-host with the Pacific COP31. How we deal with the climate crisis now is central to the future we leave young people and future generations. So I want to acknowledge and welcome the impressive group of Pacific scholars and researchers joining us here today. I pay tribute to the work you are doing to chart a course for your own futures and the futures of our shared region. Young leaders from Fiji, Samoa, Aotearoa, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Kiribati, Tonga, Solomon Islands, New Caledonia have been participating in a colloquium through ANU, and we welcome you here today.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Your time has expired. Senator Dean Smith.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. During the federal election campaign, the now Prime Minister and now Treasurer promised there would be no changes to Australia's franking credits regime. In January 2021, he said, "I can confirm Labor will not be taking any changes to franking credits to the next election." Does the recent budget measure titled "Improving the Integrity of Off-Market Share Buybacks" involve changes to franking credits?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. The measures that were announced in the budget are completely unrelated to the proposed changes to dividends in the 2019 election, which, as those in this place knows, we did not take to the 2022 election.
Senator Smith, first supplementary.
Is it correct that this budget measure will see retirees and investors pay $550 million in extra tax?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister.
I'll refer the member to the figures outlined in the budget papers.
Thank you, Minister Gallagher. Order. Order. Senator Smith, second supplementary.
President, the budget measure clearly says $550 million
Smith, is this your
in
second
extra
supplementary?
tax.
Was that your second supplementary?
No, it wasn't.
I've invited you to make your second supplementary.
Thank you, President.
Minister Wong.
She's got a thing.
Order.
Jared.
Order.
Jared, she's got a thing for you.
Is that
Senator
Standing
Smith.
Order 193? Can the minister rule out further changes to the franking credits regime under this government, and can the minister explain how retirees can trust anything this government says, given its broken promise on franking credits?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
There's no broken promise on franking credits, and the measures that the government has agreed to around focusing on tax loopholes have been announced in the budget.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Wong.
I ask that further questions be placed on notice.